All right, so I'm going to start this series of videos with a refresher, with a recap of something that we started last week. So I'm going to create a new project in Visual Studio, and I'm going to choose Console App. Some of you have been emailing me and you're starting an empty project and not getting what you need to get started. So make sure you choose this Console App, and then C++ Windows Console. That sounds good. I'm going to click on that and then choose Next. In class lecture, I don't know, you can call it whatever you want. Remember that to check here, this is where your files are being stored. So by default, it stores it in this weird source repos directory. You might want to click on the ellipse and change it someplace else that's more meaningful for you, but that's all right. For the moment, I'm just going to choose that and then choose Create. And so once that all gets up and running, there we go. So we've got some code that's already been input for us by Visual Studio. And this is a bunch of interesting tips, which I don't really need. And then in here, I would erase whatever's here and put in your name and all of the comments that we've talked about before. So in this example, let me also, using namespace, remember that Visual Studio does this thing where, let me not talk at the same time. It puts this std : and if every time I write C out, I have to put std : unless I put this statement up here on line 5. By putting this statement up here on line 5, I don't need this every time. So that's how I would begin all of my projects, is writing the std, and then this already has a C out statement, so I'm going to go ahead and run it. That way I can make sure that everything is working and that I am doing what I'm supposed to do. So I get this pop-up window that says hello world. So apparently everything is working, and then I hit the enter key and that all goes away. So I know I'm ready to begin. And so what I'm going to do first of all is sort of rehash what we did last week. I'm going to create an example where we will review some if blocks and the modulus operator, which is the remainder. All right, so we did this in class last week, but I'm going to do it anyway just to get us warmed up. So I'm going to create a variable called the mod, and I'm going to create, it's going to be an integer, and I'm going to create a string, which I'm going to put a string, I'm going to call it the output equals your result is, and then I'm going to put a semicolon. And I can see I've got some, curly cues went away, everything's happy. So the color coding is giving me some kind of indication that Visual Studio is recognizing what I'm doing. I don't have any red squirrely things, so I must be okay at the short run. All right, so now I'm going to type in, I'm going to ask the user to enter in a integer. And the idea was, if you remember last week, we put in a number and then we checked to see if it was even, or we checked to see if it was divisible by 5. So this is what I'm doing on this, this video. So we're going to get a number from the user. Remember, we want to give them a prompt so they know what it is that we're expecting to receive. And then I'm going to see in, I want to get something into the mod. So user type in, this should be semicolon, type in a value, and then I'm going to evaluate it. And that's where we use the if block, which was a decision structure. And the idea here is that it gives us the ability to say if this, else if this, otherwise do that, decision block. And so we're going to say, let me just type it out because I can't talk and type at the same time. So I'm going to do if the mod divisible by 2 is equal to 0, then do something. So what I've done here is I've said if the user typed in something, and remember this modulus, this percent means the remainder. So if whatever they typed in, the user typed in, divided by 2 returns a remainder of 0, then let's do something here. So again, C out, it's even. Your number is even. Okay? And so if I run this, I'm always going to run something. I'm going to put in a couple lines of code first, and then I'm going to test it because I don't like to write a lot of code and then find out that I have an error. So I'm going to type in something like a 5, and then nothing should happen because I don't have an else. So if I run the code again, I'm going to type in my window keeps pulling up over here, so let me pull it back. So if I type in 10, that should give me your number is even, which it does. So I know that the if condition is currently working the way I had hoped. So we have the modulus is 5, or excuse me, 2, and then we also had an out. Remember, else means if this is a catch-all. If this doesn't render true, then everything else falls in here. So this is a catch-all. Notice that I don't have a condition in front of my else, and else is just that. There is no condition. If everything else fails, everything else above the else renders false, then do this. So it doesn't have a condition. It catches everything. So we're going to put, let's see, what was I going to do? I was going to do the output equals neither. And what am I doing here? Let's see. So I'm going to do something a little bit different than I did up before. I'm going to take cout the output. And the idea here is to type, there we go, the output. So what I'm going to do is, instead of seeing out here and seeing out here, I'm going to, because ultimately there's only going to be one message that comes out of this block. It's either going to be this one, or whatever else I put in here. So I'm just going to assign this to the output. All thumbs here. The output equals. So here I'm doing, what are you upset about? Oh, I spelled it wrong. Okay, the output, there we go. So the output is either going to be this string, or the output is going to be this string, and then I only have one cout, so whatever this got filled with, I'm going to cout it down here. So that gives me the ability to also add, maybe I change my mind and I also say else if the mod divisible by 5 is equal to 0. So if you divide the value that they put in and it's divisible by 5, then we'll say the output is equal to it's divisible by 5. So again, whichever one block renders true, that's what's going to be output. So remember, we also said in class that we have to pay attention to order, right? Because if we look at this and I run, let me just run the code. And if I typed in a 10, for example, if I type in a 10, what I would want to have happen is, well, 10 is divisible by 5, so that gives me a 0 remainder. So it should say is divisible by 5. But if I type in 10, what I get instead is your number is even, because the code read this if condition first. That was true, so we output the number is even, which if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But if your goal was, you have to decide which order is more important. In other words, if I needed it to check 5 first, I would have to put that up here first. In other words, let me make that go away. Let's say, well, it's really more important to me to check to see if it's 5 first. And so then I will put this output up here. That's more important. Then I'll put this down here. And then we'll change this to 2. So now what will be checked first is, we'll check to see if it's divisible by 5. If it's not divisible by 5, then we'll check to see if it's modulus 2 or has a remainder of 0 if we divide by 2. So this was a review pretty much of the if block, and also kind of a review of some things that we've been going over so far. And in the next video, we'll start looking at while loops.